And the trial is underway now in Louisville, Kentucky for the former Kentucky police officer, Brett Hankison, who was involved in a raid that killed Breonna Taylor. Hankison is charged with firing into a neighboring apartment while serving a no-knock warrant on Taylor's apartment in March 13th of 2020. He has pleaded not guilty. If convicted, he faces up to 5 years in prison. Host and legal analyst at Law and Crime Network, Terry Austin, joins me now for more on this. Terry, opening statements have now wrapped up. What are your big takeaways?
Well, what I was impressed with is the fact that the prosecution laid out so many of the facts. In fact, I thought that the defense said that she laid out too many facts, but I think the jury is going to be very clear on at least what the prosecution is thinking the case will say to them. And essentially what Ms. Whaley is trying to tell them is there was no need for Brett Hankison to shoot wildly. He had 10 shots and several of them went into this neighboring apartment, and they are going to have witnesses to testify. Cody, who was the individual in the other apartment along with Chelsea, his partner, and in fact she was pregnant and a young son. But the testimony is basically going to be that these shots came wildly into the apartment and that Brett Hankison really didn't see an AR-15 as he thought he had. It was really a Glock. And so he wasn't justified. He was being very unreasonable. And she laid out every single detail for the jury to see. And the defense basically just said, look, this was a chaotic scene. And what Hankison did was reasonable, it was logical, and it was rational. So we'll see what the jury thinks based on this evidence.
What are you going to be looking out for these next few days as this trial gets underway? What are some of the key points and arguments that could sway this trial one way or the other?
The one piece of evidence that I'm very curious to see is what will the neighbors say? We know we're going to hear from officers. We're going to hear from the SWAT team. We're going to hear from firearms experts and trainers. But I'm really curious what the neighbors will say. Theoretically, they should be objective. They should be able to say what they heard. Was there a knock? Was there a voice that said police officers? Did anyone identify themselves? Were the shootings wild? So I'm really curious to see what those neighbors think happened on that night of the scene. And frankly, I think they're going to shed more light to the jury as far as what was happening. I think everyone is going to say it was chaotic. And frankly, I don't think that bodes well for the defense. They're supposed to be able to go into a scene and make sure that they are handling it so it doesn't become chaotic. That's not an excuse to have shot wildly into either one of those apartments.
And this is the only trial and charge, for that matter, to emerge from the police raid that killed Breonna Taylor. But Brett Hankison is not the officer who shot her. He's not being charged in relation to shooting Breonna Taylor. He's being charged for shooting into the neighbor's apartment, as you said. So what is the broader impact, if any, of this trial, since Hankison is the sole officer from that raid who's being tried?
It's an excellent question, and I think the community at large, and particularly the parents and the family of Breonna Taylor, want some justice. They want to make sure that the people responsible for her death do have charges brought against them. The state did not feel as though there was enough to bring anything against the other officers.
All right, Terry Austin, always great to have your legal analysis. Terry, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.
We're going to turn now to the trial of the officer involved in the raid that killed Breonna Taylor, the now former Louisville cop accused of firing shots that endangered a neighbor. Steve Ozasami has the latest for us this morning. Good morning, Steve.
Good morning to you, Michael. We need to underline that this officer on trial is not accused of killing Breonna Taylor, and this isn't even about the bullets that were fired into her apartment where she died as they were trying to break into her home. Instead, this officer is accused of firing shots into the apartment next door.
Americans demanding justice for the killing of 26-year-old Breonna Taylor will not find it with this trial.
On trial this morning is one of the Louisville police officers who was executing a search warrant at Taylor's home 2 years ago when she was killed. But even though it was the young black woman in apartment number 4 who died in a hail of gunfire, former police officer Brett Hankison, who was outside her door, is only accused of endangering her neighbors in apartment number 3.
This is not a case to decide who is responsible for the death of Breonna Taylor.
He's pled not guilty and is expected to take the stand in his own defense. He's charged with 3 counts of wanton endangerment. Prosecutors say the former officer showed extreme indifference to human life when he fired blindly and 3 of his bullets rang through the apartment of Breonna Taylor's next-door neighbor. On the witness stand Wednesday, that neighbor, Cody Etherton, told jurors he was home that night with his pregnant girlfriend and her 5-year-old son, and that the gunfire came just inches away from hitting him.
In my mind, I was thinking that for some reason I just thought that somebody was trying to come into our apartment. So my instinct was to go to the front door, of course, to protect my family.
Hankison's defense lawyers told jurors that the former officer was just responding to gunfire from Taylor's apartment. Authorities say that none of the 10 shots that Hankison fired killed Breonna Taylor, and instead she was killed by a bullet from another officer. None of the officers involved in the raid have been charged in connection with her death. This former officer on trial this morning is free on bond. He faces up to 5 years in prison for each of the 3 charges against him if convicted. Guys.
Thank you, Steve. Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.
I got woke to what was like a loud boom, and I jumped on my feet, and she jumped out of the bed as well. And you know, I kind of sped walked down the hallway here. And in my mind, I was thinking that for some reason I just thought that somebody was trying to come into our apartment. So my instinct was to go to the front door, of course, to protect my family. Just debris started going past my head, my face, which I pretty much knew, because I mean I heard the shots. Pretty much knew that it was gunfire coming through the wall, because that's what I do for a living is remodeling. So when drywall started hitting me in the face, like I already knew. So I hit the floor. There was probably maybe a 30-second pause. Everything got silent after the shots. Like, I don't even remember how many shots I heard because it was just so chaotic. I remember hearing them, but I couldn't tell you how many I heard. Like, it was all at once to me. I believe that I heard LMPD, get down on the ground, or somewhere along those lines. I heard something like, I heard LMPD announce themselves outside. Like, that's all I remember. And I remember having like a relief. I was like, okay, the police are out there. You know, it kind of relieved my mind because, like, I didn't know what to think at the time. Like, I didn't know if people were outside in the breezeway fighting, shooting at each other. I didn't know if we was getting robbed. Like, I just didn't know what was going on. And after I looked down the hall or into her bedroom or apartment, I heard somebody saying, I believe that was "Breathe, baby, breathe."
Breathe.
I think it was "Breathe, baby, breathe." That's what I remember hearing.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.
Today also marked the beginning of the trial against the only officer charged in connection with the death of Breonna Taylor, who was killed as officers carried out a no-knock warrant. Joining us now to unpack the day's events is ABC News contributor and civil rights lawyer with the Cochran firm, Shauna Lloyd. Thanks so much for joining us again, Shauna. So in this trial, the officer is charged with endangering Breonna Taylor's neighbors. One of those testified today and gave a window into what life has been like since that day. I want to play some of his sound for you as he testified in court with a photo of where the bullet holes came through his apartment behind him.
I literally, like 1 or 2 more inches and I would have been shot, which kind of upsets me because I think about it all the time and I'm like, my son would have never even got to meet me. I would have never even got to meet my son.
When approving these kinds of warrants, how much do judges take into consideration the risk presented to others like Breonna Taylor's neighbor?
You know, it's interesting. When these judges are presented with these search warrants, they have as much information as the officers have, but they don't always have context about what's around the address or other things of that nature. So sometimes going into that, it is a little bit of a blind process. They're relying on the law enforcement that's seeking the search warrant to ensure that they're giving as much information and that they're going to be executed with a lot more precision.
A Louisville Metro PD sergeant also took the stand today. He testified that surveillance of the apartment was done prior to carrying out the search warrant and kind of blamed a shift in officers for the chaos. However, he was not involved in the serving of the warrant. Is it common for law enforcement officers to change their plans and swap out officers?
You know, Lindsay, not often, because what happens is they have shift change. Although it's a case, it's not always worked by the same officers. So there's handover and things do get lost. I think it's very significant that a sergeant would come out and testify for the prosecution, because clearly that means that there was something about this that really didn't sit well with him.
And let's pivot to another trial today, the federal trial of the 3 officers in the killing of George Floyd. Jurors have been deliberating since 11 o'clock this morning. On average, how long do jurors typically take to deliver verdicts on a case like this?
Well, you know, juries are always a wild card. We can never predict. But what you usually find is that when jurors are taking this much time, there is something that's causing them to re-look through the information. Jurors always want to be sure that they come to the right verdict, and they're very clear about wanting to assign the proper responsibility for the proper crimes to the individuals. In this particular case, I'm actually not surprised they're taking this amount of time, because these other officers weren't all necessarily directly correlated to the death. They were people that were there and they were participating, but in different vantage points, different what information they had, what they knew, their experience level. Each one of those is very distinctly different. So I am not surprised that the jury is taking their time to comb through that to be sure that they come to the right verdict.
Right, different levels of culpability there with those officers. Shauna Lloyd, thank you so much as always.
Always a pleasure.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.